It's a little after 7 in the morning. You're standing at the edge of your garden with a cup of coffee going cold in your hand, and without really meaning to, you start counting what's out there. A cat on the fence, watching you. A bee working its way through the tomato flowers. A pigeon up on the gutter. A frog somewhere down by the hose. And something thin and low moving through the grass that you decide not to look at too closely. 5 ordinary animals. The kind you stop noticing by the time you're grown. Here's what no one tells you. Every single one of them was, somewhere, to some specific people, a god. Not a mascot. Not a good luck charm. A god with a name, a temple, and followers who would have been genuinely alarmed at what you just did, waving one of them off your lemonade. And I don't mean ancient people were spiritual in some vague way. I mean 5 animals in your specific backyard, each tied to a specific civilization that left the evidence behind in stone, in bone, in glazed clay you can still go look at today. We're going to walk through all 5. One creature, one culture at a time, no lumping everyone together into the ancients. By the end, you'll look out this same window and see a garden full of gods you'd simply stopped recognizing. Let's start with the one staring at you, the cat. Most people know the headline already. Egypt loved cats. Bastet, the cat goddess, mummified cats by the thousand. You've heard it. Here's the part that should stop you. Egypt was late. Long before there was an Egypt, before the first pyramid, before anyone had carved a single cat goddess into a single wall, someone on the island of Cyprus dug a grave. And in that grave, inches from a human body, they laid a cat. Not tossed in. Placed. Beside the person. With the kind of small offerings you'd only bother with for someone who mattered. That grave is around 9,500 years old. It predates the earliest Egyptian cat evidence by more than 4,000 years. The gap between that burial and Bastet is wider than the gap between Bastet and you. So the cat on your fence isn't descended from an Egyptian god. Trace its blood and you land on a wildcat from the Near East. A farm companion that kept the grain stores clear of mice. Thousands of years before the Nile ever got involved. Egypt didn't invent the bond. Egypt inherited it, and then did something with it nobody else had. And here's a correction worth making, because the popular version gets it slightly wrong. The Egyptians didn't kneel down and worship the animal itself. The curators who've spent their careers on this are careful about that. What they revered was what the cat was like. A creature that could cradle its kittens with total tenderness one moment and kill without hesitation the next. Protective, maternal, lethal. They saw a goddess in that combination, and they named her Bastet. So tonight, when you shoo the cat off the bed, sit with this for a second. You're brushing aside an animal humans were burying like family. Before we built a single thing you'd recognize as a city. Now look down. At the grass. At the thing you decided not to look at. The thing in the grass. The one you didn't want to name. 2 completely separate civilizations, with no contact between them, looked at the snake and reached the same verdict. It was divine. But, and this matters, they didn't get there the same way. And I'm not going to pretend they did. Go to early India first. Long before the great Buddhist monasteries we picture today, there were serpent shrines Naga, the snake deities. And they were among the oldest nature cult sites in the whole region, tied to water, to floods, to the fertility of the land. They were sacred ground. So sacred that when Buddhism spread, it didn't bulldoze them. It built on them. Some of the earliest monasteries were raised directly on the foundations of those older serpent shrines, attested from at least the 2nd century BCE. The snake was holy first. The new religion moved in on top of it. Now go to Egypt, an entire world away. Here the snake isn't a water spirit. It's a weapon. The rearing cobra, the uraeus, sat on the pharaoh's crown, right at the forehead. And scholars agree it stood for the protective power of the goddess Wadjet, poised to strike the king's enemies. One of Egypt's oldest deities, worn as a living threat aimed outward at the world. Here's where I want to be honest with you, because it would be easy to tie a neat bow on this. 2 cultures, 1 snake, same idea, case closed. It's not that clean, and pretending it is would be cheating you. These traditions almost certainly grew up independently. One made the snake a guardian of water and life. The other made it a guardian of a king. The honest read isn't that humanity inherited one ancient snake myth. It's stranger than that two unrelated peoples, for completely different reasons, both looked at the same animal and decided it belonged to the gods. That convergence is the interesting part, not a shared origin, a shared instinct. Which brings us to the animal everyone overlooks. The real surprise of this whole list. There's a bee on your tomato plant. Maybe two. You barely register them. Now, sit with this. Around 5,500 years ago, roughly 3,500 BCE, that same insect was the symbol of a king, not a minor nature spirit, not a footnote. The bee was the hieroglyph for the king of Lower Egypt. When a pharaoh listed his royal titles, one of them translated, literally, to he of the sedge and the bee, the sedge plant standing for Upper Egypt, the bee standing for Lower Egypt, the two halves of the entire kingdom, and one of them was spelled with the bug currently crawling across your patio furniture. And it goes further. The temple of the goddess Neith at Sais had a name. They called it the House of the Bee. I love this one for the sheer mismatch of scale. We hand the cat all the glory, the statues, the mummies, the blockbuster museum exhibits. But by the evidence, the bee may be the older political religious animal in Egypt, stamped onto the king's own name while cat worship was still finding its feet. And it's not folklore. An entomologist, an actual working bee scientist, is one of the people who'll tell you the symbolism is real and it's that old. Think about what that means, standing in your garden. The cat got the fame. The bee got the crown. The most ignored creature on this entire list spent thousands of years woven into the title of the most powerful person in one of history's greatest civilizations. And now it's a thing you wave away from your drink without a second thought. That's the pattern with all of these, by the way. The more ordinary the animal feels to you, the more likely someone, somewhere, built something enormous around it. Which is exactly why the next one, small, slippery, the kind of thing kids chase and adults ignore, was pressed against the bodies of frightened women hoping to stay alive. The frog by your hose. Down in the damp, where the soil stays dark. In ancient Egypt, that animal meant one thing above all, life arriving, and life surviving the moment it arrives. You have to understand what childbirth was back then. It was the most dangerous thing a woman could do, and everyone knew it. No guarantees, and very little medicine. There was hope, and there was the divine. The frog was tied to both, in the form of Heket, a goddess of fertility and of childbirth herself. And we know this isn't a guess, because the objects survived. Small frog-shaped amulets, little frogs of glazed faience that pregnant women wore, pressed close, hoping for an easy delivery. You can stand in a museum today and look at one in its case. Picture the woman it belonged to, frightened, hopeful, near her time, holding a tiny clay frog against her body and asking it to carry her through. Why a frog, of all things? Because the Egyptians watched their world closely. After the Nile flooded each year and the waters pulled back, the banks would suddenly teem with frogs, thousands of them, appearing as if life itself had boiled up out of the mud. To them, that was abundance made visible. The connection went so deep that the hieroglyphic sign for the number 100,000 was a tadpole. When a scribe needed to write a number so large it meant almost countless, he drew the thing wriggling in your garden pond. So the frog isn't a punchline. It was a promise. It stood at the two biggest thresholds a person ever faces, being born and surviving the act of giving birth. And it carried the weight of 100,000 all on its own, which leaves one animal, the one on the gutter, the one you're least likely to believe was ever holy because where you live, it's basically a nuisance. The pigeon, the dove. Same bird, and that word, dove, is about to do some heavy lifting. Most animals on this list belong to one place. The dove refused to stay put. It carried a goddess across 2,000 years and 2 empires, and it never set her down. Start in Mesopotamia, at the very beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE. Doves are already there on the cult objects of Inanna, later known as Ishtar. goddess of love and of war. Centuries later, in the temple of Ishtar at the city of Ashur, archaeologists found little dove figurines cast in lead, left as offerings, around the 13th century BCE. The bird and the goddess, bound together, generation after generation. And then, the strangest part. That bond didn't die when Ishtar's world faded. It migrated. When the Greeks built their own goddess of love, Aphrodite, the dove came with her, still her sacred bird. There's even a thread in the language itself. The Greek word for dove may trace back to a Semitic phrase meaning, roughly, the bird of Ishtar. If that's right, then every time a Greek said the plain word for the bird on the rooftop, he was carrying a Mesopotamian goddess's name in his mouth without ever knowing it. Think about what that means on your gutter right now. The pigeon you'd chase off a ledge is the same lineage of bird that human beings, for thousands of years, across cultures that rose and fell and replaced one another, kept choosing to stand for love itself. The empires changed the goddess's name. They never changed the bird. That's 5. The cat, the snake, the bee, the frog, the dove, 5 animals in one ordinary garden. 5 gods, 5 different peoples, each one specific, each one real. And every one of them you'd quietly learn to look straight through. So here's what's actually out your window. Not a cat, a bug, a snake, a frog, and a pigeon. A burial older than the pyramids. A guardian 2 civilizations invented twice, on their own, for reasons of their own. A crown. A prayer pressed against a mother's body. And a goddess of love who outlived every empire that ever held her, riding on the back of the most common bird in the world. The animals never changed. We did. We got busy, we stopped looking, and a garden full of gods quietly became a garden full of pests. You don't have to take my word for any of it. I'd rather you didn't. Pick one, just one, the one that surprised you most. The bee? Maybe? Go look up where it was a god, who knelt for it, and how long ago. Then tell me in the comments which animal you chose and what you found, and name the culture. Be specific, the way they were specific. And the next time you stand at that window with your coffee going cold, count again. You'll get to 5 a lot faster now. I read every single one.